Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. The status of Hadeeth in Islam.
Through the Quranic and historical perspective.
How were Ahadith compiled?
How did these Ahadith reach us? What is their status in Deen?
What is the mutual relationship of the Quran and Ahadith? Ghulam Ahmad Parwez. Muhammad Aslam Jairajpuri.
To the knowledge of Ahadith.
This article was written by Allama Hafiz Muhammad Aslam Jairajpuri. Regarding Ahadith i.e., sayings, acts and circumstances etc. which are attributed to the Messenger and collected in a number of books. There was an argument from the outset that their status was not according to Deen but was historical, whose basis was on the fact that their attribution to Rasulullah was uncertain because the status of information is such that it changes from morning to evening and becomes something quite different from the original. And the greater the stature of the man to whom the narrations are attributed,
the greater is the possibility of changes in such reported information, and the last messenger was the greatest man on earth.
Therefore right from the 1st century A.H.
there was the appearance of such sects within the Ummah who used to develop Ahadith in accordance with their own ends and began to attribute these to the Messenger. These translations and unauthentic narratives of these creators and fabricators,
of which many collections are available, provide evidence that of all the kinds of books on Ahadith which are in the hands of the Ummah today, none of these was written during the lifetime of the Messenger or of his companions,
with the exception of Mayota by Imam Malik, which was compiled in the 2nd century A.H. The remainder of all the books of Ahadith, including Sahih Sitta, were compiled in the 3rd century A.H. and later. The authors of Ahadith accepted these attributions as Deen, and due to their influence the status of Ahadith became established within the whole of the Ummah as Deen. But a faction within these authors always considered the Quran alone as the complete Deen and considered Ahadith to be the history of Deen. Therefore I wished to bring those chapters of the history of Ahadith to light from which the truth becomes evident, so that the correct status can be ascertained. 2.1 Attribution of Ahadith. The beginning of the emergence of these narratives had already started in the lifetime of Rasulullah.
During the time that some of his companions were not in his company, they would question and listen to the other companions who were present, regarding the discussions and sayings of the Messenger. Hazrat Umar is quoted as saying that my Ansar neighbor and I used to be in the company of the Messenger turn by turn on a daily basis.
Then we would both discuss what had occurred during our respective day there with each other.
But these people would only hear from those in whom they themselves had trust. This was because in this era there were hypocrites who used to attribute all sorts of wrong things to Rasulullah. And they used to mingle with the Muslims, and it was difficult to differentiate between them. So much so that Allah himself addressed the Messenger and stated, "Some of the Medanites are bent upon hypocrisy. You do not know them, but I do." 9:101. Moreover, the Messenger's specific instruction was that you should desist from attributing too many sayings to me.
That is why during the era of the Messenger there were few narratives, and those too had the status of news.
After the demise of the Messenger, when his companions became bereft of his most revered presence, they would during times of leisure, when a few of them would be sitting together, refresh their minds with reminiscences of their time with him. But differences started to appear in these narratives. Because of this, the first caliph, Hazrat Abu Bakr, totally forbade the mention of any attributions to the Messenger forthwith, and gathering the people, proclaimed, "Today you differ, and tomorrow the coming generations will also differ. Therefore do not attribute any saying to Rasulullah. If someone asks, tell him that there is the Quran between us. What the Quran has declared right, consider it as right, and what it has declared wrong, consider it as wrong." Despite this prohibition, this process of attributions continued however, because it was not declared to be a crime. The second caliph, Hazrat Umar, in his time also used to forbid attributions. Qaza bin Ka'b says that a team of us once set out on a journey to Iraq. Hazrat Umar accompanied us to Muqam-e-Zara, a place name, to see us off, and reaching there said, "Do you know why I came here?" We said, "To respect and honor us." He replied, "Yes, and also because I wanted to say to you that you are going to that place where people's voices are like the humming of bees when they recite the Quran. Therefore do not imprison them in ahadith and thus prevent them from the Quran.
And do not narrate sayings to them."
Qaza says that after that day I never narrated a hadith. In the case of attributions, Hazrat Umar was so strict that when he saw Abi bin Ka'b narrating ahadith, he picked up a switch and got ready to beat him. Abu Salma once asked Abu Huraira, who was famous for the narration of many ahadith, whether he used to narrate ahadith in this same way even during the times of Hazrat Umar. He said if I had done it in his time, he would have struck me. In this regard, Hazrat Umar was so strict that he did not care even about the companions of the Messenger. It is reported that he reprimanded Hazrat Abdullah bin Masud, Abu al-Dard and Abu Zar, demanding, "Why do you keep narrating the sayings of Rasulullah?" Then he confined them to Medina, and as long as they remained alive did not give permission for them to leave.
The third caliph, Hazrat Usman, never paid any attention to attributions and used to reject them.
Muhammad, the son of Hazrat Ali, once took a note from his father in which an order of Rasulullah regarding zakat was written, and presented it to Hazrat Usman. He said, "Keep me out of this." The fourth caliph, Hazrat Ali, used to forbid from referring frequently to the sayings of the Messenger. When someone would refer to a hadith in front of him, he would make him take an oath. He would regularly warn not to narrate ahadith that the people did not know about. Do
you wish that the people should start falsifying
Allah and Rasulullah? Just like the Khulafai Rashidun, the first four caliphs. The Sahaba were also very strict with regard to any attributions. Some of them would completely desist from quoting ahadith. In Sahih Bukhari it is stated that Hazrat Abdullah questioned his father Hazrat Zubair, saying that I never hear you narrating ahadith the way I have heard others do so. He replied that I have never left Rasulullah, but I have heard the Messenger say that he who lies about me should make his abode in hell. Hazrat Zubair then said that I see people add the word deliberately in this statement i.e. he who lies about me deliberately.
Allah is witness to it that I did not hear this word from Rasulullah.
It seems that people added this word to expand the attribution, otherwise the truth is that attributing anything wrong towards the Messenger, whether deliberate or not, is purchasing Jahannam, hell, for oneself. It is quoted from Hazrat Ans as well, that this declaration from the Messenger prevents me from quoting any hadith. In Sunan ibn Majah it is noted that Abdur Rahman bin Abi Layla requested Hazrat Zayd bin Arqam to quote a hadith of Rasulullah.
He replied, "I have become aged and forgetful, and narrating a hadith of Rasulullah is a very serious matter." Saib bin Yazid reports that I accompanied Hazrat Sa'd bin Malik as far as Medina, but I never heard him narrating any hadith.
Similarly, Imam Shabi states that I remained in the service of Hazrat Umar for up to a year but never heard a hadith from his lips. Not only did the Sahaba never quote a hadith themselves, but when they heard ahadith from others, were reluctant in accepting them. This is the reason that it is proven that the majority of the Sahaba were reluctant to accept many attributions to the Messenger. It is from this that those people who do not consider ahadith as part of deen receive endorsement for their view. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas did not accept the Narration of Hazrat Abu Hurairah that ablution becomes spoiled by anything that has been touched by fire, and said that by extension then ablution performed with water warmed by fire cannot be done. When Hazrat Mahmud Ansari, who was a Sahabi, narrated a hadith that the fire of hell would be haram for anyone who said, La ilaha illallah, there is no God except Allah. Hazrat Abu Ayyub Ansari said, by Allah, I do not consider that Rasulullah could ever have said so.
When the Sahaba perceived some narratives as
being contrary to the Quran, they refused to accept them.
For example, an attribution to Fatima bint Kai, which says that a woman getting a revocable divorce,
Talaq-e-bain, has no right to a house or routine expenses. Tafka from a husband was not accepted by Hazrat Umar, who said, how can I accept something said by a woman which is against the Quran, and who does not even know if she has remembered it correctly or not? When Ibn Umar narrated an attribution associated with Qalb-e-Badr, according to which dead people listen, al-Mu'minin Hazrat Aisha said that may Allah have mercy on Ibn Umar, because the Quran says that the dead cannot hear. See verse 35-22. Similarly, when an attribution was narrated to Hazrat Aisha that a dead person gets azab, punishment, when his near and dear ones wail for him, she said that this was not true, because the Quran says that the burden of one person will not be borne by another. See verse 53-38.
From such types of attributions it becomes clear that the companions did not consider ahadith as the final word in deciding matters and would refuse to accept them.
Based sometimes on the Quran, and sometimes on the personal judgment. Because of the reasons given above, the collections of ahadith during the period of the companions was very limited. Moreover, they were extremely busy in the practical world in the task of dissemination of the Quranic message and due to their engagement in battles and victories, and had little opportunity to sit and narrate attributions. It is therefore highly likely that many of those sayings which have been attributed to them have been compiled at a far later date after their time, when the collecting of ahadith became a pastime, and it now became necessary to find authentication for each narration, which was not possible without referencing it to a companion of the Messenger. Among the group of Sahaba, the one to whom the greatest number of narrations is attributed is Hazrat Abu Hurairah. Ibn Muqlid says that the number of attributions attributed to him was 5,374, though he became a Muslim during the battle at Khaybar and only had the opportunity of being in the company of the Messenger for 3 years. So why should we believe that his narrations could be so many, and out of which many are such that when they are subjected to intellect and knowledge, they are caught out and can still be questioned? Therefore our conscience does not accept that he would have narrated such attributions. Then came the period of the followers of the Sahaba, in which the tyranny of Bani Umayyah was imposed on the Ummah. And each Muslim, instead of being free, independent and only a man of Allah, as he was during the time of the first 4 caliphs, was now trapped in the grip of a monarchical dictatorship, and the entire Ummah was made subservient through tyranny and force. This is why there was a visible change in the psyche of the people. And the state of righteousness and good conduct did not remain the same as that which had prevailed during the period of the companions of the Messenger. Because of the segregation of state and religion, religious leadership fell into the hands of scholars, due to which the practice of narrations increased considerably. Still, a great deal of truth existed among the followers and students of the Sahaba, who were very careful in the selection and acceptance of attributions. Gradually, at the beginning of the 2nd century A.H., when the period of the writing of ahadith started, it adopted the cloak of a profession, and the seekers of ahadith started meeting those scholars who had attained fame in this field in order to acquire these ahadith, and this process thus gained momentum. During the Abbasid period, which started in 132 A.H., The narration of Ahadith amplified like a flood, and this practice spread extensively in all the Muslim states of the time. This was because of the materialism of the caliphs and the aristocracy, and their neglect of deen.
And the seekers of deen all gathered around the scholars of Ahadith, thus increasing the stature and grandeur of the latter.
Seeing this, thousands among those who were more interested in worldly luxuries and fame also adopted the profession of Ahadith, and by narrating all types of sayings, true and false, started to impress the people with their wisdom.
So much so that the numbers of Ahadith swelled to many hundreds of thousands. Imam Ibn Hanbal says that the number of true Ahadith is more than 700,000.
Imam Yahya bin Mo'in, known as Amir al-Mominin, leader of believers of Ahadith, was the owner of 1.2 million Ahadith.
The preface of Sahih Bukhari notes that when Imam Bukhari started writing his Sahih,
out of the 600,000 Ahadith which he had in his possession, he found 7,275 which met his criteria and which he put down in writing.
But out of those very scholars of Ahadith whose job day and night was these narrations, such people arose who became fed up with this and began to consider it against taqwa,
righteousness. From his book Muqtazar Jama Bayan al-Ilm o Fazl by Hafiz ibn Abdul Bar, who died in 463 AH. I will quote the following. Zahaq ibn Mazahim, who died in 105 AH, said that the time is coming when the Quran will be hung up and it will be covered with cobwebs, and no one will make use of it, and the deeds of people will be based on ahadith and narrations. Sulaiman bin Hayyan,
who died in 196 AH,
also known as Abu Khalid al-Allama, said that such a time will come when people will give up courtiership,
Musahif,
and ahadith and fiqh will be their only pastime. Imam Daud Tai stopped referring to narrations. He was asked, "How long will you sit in your house having quit ahadith?" He replied, "I don't like to tread even a step in that path which is against truth." Hazrat Fazil bin Ariaz Abid al-Harmain, who died in 187 AH, was approached by a group of ahadith seekers. He did not permit them entry to his house and looked out at them through a window. The visitors bade him salam and inquired about his welfare. He replied that I am at peace with Allah but am troubled from you. The pursuit in which you are indulging is a new diversion in Islam. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You have left the book of Allah. Had you sought guidance from it, you would have received contentment of heart. The people replied, "We have read it already." He said, "This is such a book that it will keep both you and your offspring sufficiently occupied," and then recited the following verse. O mankind, there has come to you a direction from your sustainer and healing for your hearts, and for those who have Iman a guidance and mercy. Say, in the bounty of Allah and in His mercy, in that let them rejoice. That is better than wealth they hoard. 10:57-58. Imam Sufyan Suri, who died in 161 AH, used to say with regret, "What good is that knowledge in which having spent 60 years, the only wish now is that I should have come out safely and neither had torment nor reward." He once said that if ahadith had been a good thing, then they would not have increased with each passing day. Imam Shaba said that previously when I would see a muhaddith expert on ahadith, I used to feel pleasure. But today nothing is more repugnant to me now than to see any of their faces. Once, while addressing a group of narrators of ahadith, he said, "This hadith stops you from reverting to Allah and Salat. Will you stop doing this?" Imam Sufyan bin Ania, who died in 198 AH, used to say, "I wish this knowledge, ahadith, had been a basket full of glasses, and had it fallen, breaking into pieces, then at least I would have been rid of its buyers." On one occasion he said, that he who wishes to be enemies with me, may Allah make him my Hadeeth. One day he said to a group of Ahadith experts that had Hazrat Umar seen us both, he would have whipped us. Like Imam Shaba, he too was wary of Mahadith. To get away from the crowd of seekers of Ahadith he went back to his ancestral village, Mail Aksar, and used to say that had Ahadith been good, it would have kept decreasing and not continued to multiply. A renowned poet of his era, Bakar bin Hamad, expressed similar views. 1. After writing the destiny of all the creatures, the pen dried. Now some of them are unfortunate and hopeless and some unlucky. 2. Time is passing by quickly for people, and Allah is creating His creatures one after the other. 3. I see that the good things of the world are getting less and becoming scarce, but Ahadith are continually increasing. 4. Had this also been a good thing, then like other good things, it too would have kept decreasing. I think that any good in Ahadith is a far cry.
The above quotes are of those of vision from among the scholars of Ahadith, who had seen the greatness and comprehensiveness of the Quran and had understood that the status of Ahadith had nothing to do with deen.
But the common compilers of Ahadith were so overwhelmed by its religious status that it was impossible for them to think otherwise.
Therefore, to counter the influence of the sayings of these Imams, the scholars of Ahadith started spreading Ahadith related to gaining sawab, and tried to raise their significance.
Moreover, to counter these Imams they created such narratives as that Rasulullah said that soon it will happen that one of you, with a full stomach and relaxing on a cushion in bed, will, after listening to my Ahadith, say that between you and us is the Quran, therefore consider its halal as halal and its haram as haram. Remember that the Quran has been revealed upon me and with it, its similar
book,
or even more. Though as already quoted, Hazrat Siddiq-e Akbar, first Caliph, at the time of forbidding from narratives had said that if someone asks, tell him that between you and me there is the Quran. What it has called legitimate is legitimate, and what it has declared illegitimate, consider it illegitimate. Moreover, Hazrat Umar used to say, for us, the Book of Allah is enough. Against these statements, this saying considers the Quran to be not enough and incomplete, which is an absolute proof of its being fake. After looking at such mutually contradictory narratives, which are in every area and department, the Mu'tazilas had bitterly attacked the Muhaddisin, plural of Muhaddith, expert of Ahadith, saying that you have contaminated deen with false narratives and created divisions among scholars. And because of this the scholars have started opposing one another, indeed started calling each other kafirs, and the Ummah has been divided into sects.
By writing the book, Mukhtalif al-Hadeeth, Imam Ibn Qaytabar tried to address these objections, but what else was there in it other than Ahadith-based casuistics, Muhaddisana Tawilat, and contradictory interpretations? So much so, that the quake that shook the citadel of Ahadith due to these Imams was not too difficult for the Muhaddisin to stop in its tracks. Ultimately Ahadith triumphed to such an extent that their significance was increased far beyond that of the Quran. Imam Awza'i declared that the Quran is far more dependent on Ahadith than the Ahadith on the Quran. Imam Yahya bin Kasir says that Ahadith has precedence over the Quran, but the Quran has no precedence over Ahadith. When Imam Hanbal was told this, he replied, that I dare not go to that extent, but I will say that Ahadith are the explanation, tafsir, of the Quran. 2.2 Writing of Ahadith. Rasulullah had declared very clearly, do not write anything from me except the Quran, and if someone has noted anything down, then destroy it. This narrative is quoted in Sahih Muslim, because of which the Muhaddisin could not call this hadith unauthentic, due to the fact that the whole structure of the compilers of Ahadith would have come tumbling down as a result of it.
They therefore interpreted it in such a way by saying that the purpose of refraining from doing this was that nothing else should be mixed up with the Quran. Therefore, if there was no fear of mixing up the two, the Quran and Ahadith,
the writing of Ahadith was allowed.
By this method, the very clear and precise order of Rasulullah forbidding the writing of Ahadith was nullified. Even though the Messenger had not given any explanation for saying this, and without any ambiguity had categorically stopped this practice. If the aim of the Messenger had been that the Quran and Ahadith should not get mixed up, he could have said to write both separately. Therefore this excuse given by Muhaddithin is incorrect, and the real reason for it is what the companions of the Messenger rightly understood, i.e., that previous nations were misguided because of writing narratives of their messengers.
If the writing of Ahadith regarding previous messengers and particularly the last messenger had been according to intellect and knowledge, then it could have been a very useful and agreeable work.
But this is a psychological problem that after the collection and compiling of narratives of such very great personalities, nations give these the same status as actual deen and disregard the divine revelation.
This was the reason based on which Rasulullah forbade the writing of Ahadith. The compilers of Ahadith even tried to find reasons from within certain narratives themselves to justify their writings.
For example, there is a narrative that Hazrat Abu Hurairah said that whatever I used to hear from Rasulullah, I used to write it down. Moreover, he also quoted that Hazrat Abdullah bin Umar bin al-Aras also used to do this. Similarly, there is a narrative that a man from Yemen, Abu Shah, once requested Rasulullah that his khutbah, addressed to a meeting, should be written down, and Rasulullah had it written. But these things will be counted as exceptions.
The general order was that nothing apart from the Quran was to be written, and the Sahaba acted accordingly.
Therefore, in the book Kitab al-Ilm by Abu Dawud, it is noted that Hazrat Sa'id bin Sabit, the writer of the revelation, once went to Hazrat Amir Muawiyah, who asked him about a hadith. When Hazrat Sa'id quoted it, Amir Muawiyah asked a person to write it down.
Hazrat Sa'id took it and deleted it, and said that Rasulullah has given an order that his saying should not be written.
In Tazkirat al-Hafaz, Imam Zabi has written that Hazrat Abu Bakr had a compilation of nearly 500 ahadith. One night he was very troubled and uneasy about this, and eventually in the morning he took it and set fire to it. Obviously, whose collection could have been more accurate than Hazrat Abu Bakr's?
But he considered even the keeping of it to be contrary to taqwa, righteousness,
lest a wrong attribution may have been included in it. Urwa bin Zubair is quoted as saying that Hazrat Umar once expressed the wish that Sunan be written. And he even consulted with the Sahaba, who gave their opinion. Then for a month, he kept praying to Allah and performing istikhara. Ultimately he gave up the idea and said that earlier nations were destroyed because they wrote ahadith about their messengers and became dependent on them alone and left Allah's book. In the same way that Hazrat Umar was strict in stopping ahadith being quoted, he was strict against the writing down of hadith. During his time when ahadith became numerous, he announced that people should bring the ahadith to him. He then took all these ahadith and burnt them and said, "Do you want to make it the Masnad?" Second book
of Al-Kitab.
Opening parenthesis. The Jews had collected the sayings of their messengers and called it Masnad.
The actions of other Sahaba are quoted from page 33 from Muqtazar Jama Bayan al-Ilm.
Abdullah bin Yasser says that Hazrat Ali once said in his khutbah that I bid every person who has any written hadith that on return from here he should destroy it, because previous nations were destroyed for this very reason, because they followed the narrations of their scholars and left Allah's book. Abu Nusra asked Hazrat Abu Sa'id Qadri, "Should we write down those ahadith that we hear from your lips?" He retorted, "Do you want to make them masahif?" Hazrat Zaid bin Sabit was once summoned by Caliph Marwan. There, Hazrat Zaid bin Sabit saw some people writing ahadith.
He said, "It is possible that the way ahadith have been narrated to you is not the way it may be."
A compilation was once brought to Hazrat Abdullah bin Masud in which were ahadith. He burnt them and said, "I ask in the name of Allah that whichever individual among you has a hadith he should certainly come and let me know, so that I can reach there. The Allah Kitab that came before you were destroyed because they gave up on the Book of Allah in preference to these kinds of writings." Hazrat Abdullah bin Abbas also used to forbid people from writing ahadith and used to say that the destruction of previous nations was because of this reason. This was the stance of Abdullah bin Umar also. After the era of the Sahaba
came the era of scholarly followers, for example, Al-Qama, Masruq, Qasim Shabi, Mansur, Mughira, and Amish etc., none of whom considered the compilation of ahadith as legitimate.
Imam Awza'i used to say that as long as the knowledge of ahadith remained verbal it was tolerable knowledge. But the moment it was committed to writing its light disappeared and it fell into the hands of incompetent people. This was the reason why ahadith remained unwritten till the time of the Tabi'in, immediate followers of the companions. And apart from the Quran, the Ummah had no other book. Some things were written simply from the point of view of knowledge.
For example, in his period of caliphate, Safar 99 to Rajab 101a.
H.
Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz had ahadith written by Sa'id bin Ibrahim.
And he sent a command to the Qazi of Medina, Abu Bakr bin Hazm, that the narrations held by Umrah be written down because he said that I am fearful that with her death, her knowledge will go to waste.
This woman, Umrah, used to have knowledge of the sayings of Hazrat Aisha.
According to the first generation of ahadith compilers, Imam Ibn Shihab Zari,
who died in 124 H,
has been recognized as the leading compiler. He was highly respected in the courts of the Umayyad dynasty and had written ahadith according to their very orders. He himself admits that we did not wish to write ahadith, but we were made to write under duress by these caliphs. After Imam Zari, Imam Jarrah compiled ahadith in Makkah. Muhammad bin Ishaq and Malik bin Uns in Medina. Rabi bin Sabi and Hamad bin Salma in Basra. And Sufyan Sari in Kufa. Awza'i compiled ahadith in Syria. Muammar in Yemen. Bayam in Wasit. Jarir in Ray, and Ibn Makan compiled ahadith in Khurasan.
All of them belong to the same period and compiled books on ahadith, though they all belong to second H. As far as
the historical record is concerned, apart from Mayota by Imam Malik, who died in 179 H. None of these books is available to the Ummah.
Even in his various editions, there are only 300 to 500 ahadith.
It is said that as long as Imam Malik was alive, every year he used to score out some ahadith. This is why there are different numbers of ahadith in his different editions. In these initial compilations, ahadith of Rasulullah, the sayings of the Sahaba and the decrees, fatwas, of the followers, were all mixed up. In later times people started to separate the ahadith of the Messenger. These kinds of writings are called certified.
The very first certification was written by Abdullah bin Musa at the beginning of 3rd H.
This was followed by Mas'ud Basri, Asad bin Musa and Neem bin Hamad etc. The people that came later also followed suit. For example, Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, Ishaq bin Rahoya, Usman bin Abi Shayba, etc.
In the fourth group, Imam Bukhari,
who died in 256 H, tried to write only authentic
Sahih
ahadith. He was also followed by his student Imam Muslim Nishapuri, who died in 261
H.
Both of these books are called Sahihan, the authentic ones. From this time onwards, the writing of Ahadith became a common profession, and so many books were compiled on various aspects that it is difficult to count them. The important point to note here is that if Ahadith had a status in Deen, then Rasulullah himself and his Sahaba would never have so strictly forbidden people from writing Ahadith, rather they would have made efforts to safeguard them. 2.3 Concocting of Ahadith. In spite of the repeated direction of the Messenger,
that he who lies about me shall make his abode in hell, this saying has been attributed to so many Sahaba that some Muhaddisin have claimed it to have been a continuous process.
Tawata. But in spite of this, there were people in this same era who started narrating false Ahadith. In Tawji un-Nazar, page 246, it is noted that even during the life of the Messenger, people lied about him, and there were apostates and hypocrites in the days of the Sahaba. Apart from the apostates and the hypocrites, during the period of the Sahaba when narratives spread among the people, embellishment and falsehood started mixing in with Ahadith.
Sahih Muslim has quoted that Bashir bin Ka'b started saying Ahadith in front of Ibn Abbas, who did not pay any attention.
Bashir asked him, "Why is it that you are not listening to me?" He replied that there was a time when if someone narrated what Rasulullah said, we would rush toward him and listen attentively. But since people have started narrating whatever came to their minds in the name of Ahadith, from that time onwards we have left Ahadith. After the Sahaba, there was a gradual increase in the number of liars and concoctors of Ahadith because during the reign of the Umayyad dynasty, due to the separation of governance and religion, there was no check on the narrators of the Faruqi whip. And they got the opportunity to write whatever true or false Ahadith they wanted. Compared to the Quran, the Umayyad caliphs generally considered Ahadith to be more suited to the government and tyranny. They themselves started the custom of criticizing Hazrat Ali in the mosques and had hundreds of Ahadith concocted against him and in favor of Emir Muawiyah. During the Abbasid reign, Ahadith were concocted in praise and flattery of every caliph. So much so, that such Ahadith were disseminated which said that as long as an individual does not love Hazrat Abbas and his progeny, he cannot have Iman in his heart. Their protagonists used to develop Ahadith against the Umayyad caliphs right from the outset. In those days the invention of lies became so rampant that thousands of professional liars sprung up whose only function day and night was to invent more Ahadith. The rhetoric and storytelling of most orators of Ahadith had such a great influence on the people that they were considered extremely pious and saintly, and the Ulama Ahadith, scholars of Ahadith, could not compete with them. In Mizan al-I'tidal, Zabi has referred to Shabi, considered the greatest Imam-e-Hadith of Kufa, who said that I began to offer prayers in a mosque and an orator with a flowing beard was giving a speech, saying that Allah has created two trumpets, each one of which will be blown twice. I quickly finished my prayers and told him, "O man, fear Allah and do not state false Ahadith. There is just one trumpet." He became annoyed and retorted, "What a wicked man who falsifies great men." No sooner had these words left his lips, that the public fell upon me and began to beat me, and did not leave me till the time they got agreement from me that Allah had created three trumpets. Mullah Ali Qari writes in Mawzu'at-e-Kaaba, Major Topics, that a storyteller, while narrating details of Muqam-e-Mahmud, admired place, said that Rasulullah will sit with Allah on his supreme throne. Arsh. Imam Ibn Jarir Tabri opposed him and wrote on the door of his own house that none can share the throne of Allah. The people of Baghdad became annoyed at this and stoned his door to such an extent that the door became blocked with stones. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and Yahya bin Mo'in, who hold high status among the Imams of Ahadith, once offered prayers in the district of Rasafa in Baghdad. Akasas, storyteller, in the mosque started a speech.
saying that I have heard from Ahmad bin Hanbal and Yahya bin Mo'in, who both heard from Muammar, who in turn heard from Qatada, who in turn heard from Hazrat Uns, and he in turn heard from Rasulullah that when a man says, La ilaha illallah,
there is no God except Allah, then from each and every word of this, Allah creates a bird whose beak is golden and whose wings are of gems. After listening to this lengthy tale, both Imams looked at each other, and then Yahya bin Mo'in called the storyteller over and asked him, "From whom did you hear this hadith?" He said, "From Yahya bin Mo'in and Ahmad bin Hanbal." He replied, "I am Yahya and this is Ibn Hanbal, but neither of us have ever heard of this narration before today. If you had to lie, you should have taken someone else's name." The storyteller said that I had heard that Yahya bin Mo'in is a stupid fellow, and today it has been confirmed. It was asked, "How come?" He replied that there are 17 Yahya bin Mo'ins and 17 Ahmad bin Hanbals whom I quote from.
How did you conclude that you are the only Yahya in the world?
Hearing this, they both covered their faces with their sleeves and silently left the place.
The popularity of these storytellers and preachers was such that the people considered them as their guides, and used to believe in whatever they said.
There is a narrative regarding the mother of Imam Azam Abu Hanifa who asked her son about some issue to which the Imam gave an answer. She replied that I will not believe it till the time that it is certified by Cheese's Zohar of the Mosque of Kufa. As a result, the Imam took her there himself, and when Zohar had said that the verdict, fatwa, was correct, only then did she accept it. In Mizan al-Ittidal, Imam Zabi has quoted from
Jafar bin Hajjaj that after reaching Mosul, Muhammad bin Abdullah started narrating strange kinds of ahadith.
When the scholars of ahadith learnt about this, some among them wanted to go there to refute them. He was engrossed in delivering a speech to a crowd. And when he saw the scholars coming towards him, he understood the issue and at once started to create a narrative, attributing it to Jabir, that the Quran is the word of Allah and is non-creation.
Now from fear of the public, these scholars did not have the courage to step forward and confront him. This was the reason why, if scholars of ahadith dared to say anything against such people, their followers would come and argue vehemently in their support.
Imam Daud Tai gave up referring to attribution from this very fear and used to say that it pains me that people come to me and when I get something written, they start finding faults of mine with it. Imam Amish used to say, by Allah, by rejecting ahadith, you people have made my mouth even more bitter than oud.
To whomever you turn, you do not leave till you have made him tell lies. And Ibn Masra used to say that when you see a sheikh running, you can be sure that he is being chased by the followers of ahadith.
There were hundreds of concoctors of ahadith who used to invent ahadith in secret and spread them among their factions. If their credibility had been less, they would have used the established names of narrators of ahadith. There were some among them who used to forge the writing of their scholars, and would stealthily include their own ahadith into the books of these scholars. Still others, thinking it to be a work of sawab, used to invent ahadith. Never mind attributions, some of these concoctors wrote complete books of ahadith which are fabrications from beginning to end. Allama Ibn Jawza has written the following reasons for the invention of ahadith.
1.
Certain people, who strongly desired piety, were careless in their learning by heart and would repeat things quite different from the original sayings. 2. Some of the scholars forgot their actual memorized sayings and were forced to make use of what remained of their memories and would say whatever came to their minds. 3. Many established narrators whose intellect had weakened due to old age started saying wrong narratives. 4. There were certain people who wrote wrong narrations and later, despite being aware of their mistakes, considered it beneath their dignity to accept this.
5. Zanadika invented such ahadith which can
destroy Sharia. 6. When religious sectarianism was born and sects like Sunni, Shia, Qaji, Qadri, Jami, Mazjia, Mu'tazila etc. came into existence, at that time most of them invented ahadith in order to support their own sects and to contradict others.
7.
There were many pious people who used to invent ahadith in order to encourage people towards good and to frighten people from wrongdoing. 8.
There were some who thought that for every
favorite narrative it was legitimate to invent authenticity and relate it to Rasulullah, and they used to do it in practice. 9. The courtiers and sycophants of the caliphs and the aristocracy used to invent narratives according to the wishes of their masters,
and used it as a means to get closer to them in order to earn favors from them.
10. Storytellers and religious speakers used to attribute all sorts of tales to Rasulullah and his companions because this was the only capital of their business. These were the 10 major reasons due to which lies and fabrications were spread among the Ummah.
Over and above all this,
political parties who wanted to conquer the hearts and minds of their subjects through deen also concocted ahadith and spread these, sometimes openly and at other times secretly, from east to west. In addition, these egotistical people invented narratives to impress others with their knowledge and piety in order to gain fame and sainthood. Because of these inventors of ahadith, such a curse descended on ahadith the extent of which is difficult to assess. This was because these inventors had invaded every aspect of ahadith,
and had left no topic or section among them unaffected in which they had not invented ahadith of their own choice, and with each and every truth mixed hundreds and hundreds of lies.
Whole chapters are fabrications. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal says that there are 3 books that have no truth: Mulaham, forecasts,
Maghazi,
fights,
and Tafsir.
How many ahadith are contained in each one of them can be imagined from the fact that one of his own companions named Abu Za'a had memorized 140,000 ahadith in Tafsir alone. The impact of falsehood was so severe that never mind the inventing of narratives, many Sahaba were invented as well. In Tazkirat al-Mawzu'at, on page 102 it is noted. Many historians agree that the last Sahabi, the companion of the Messenger of Allah,
who was left living in the world, was Hazrat Abu al-Tufail Amir bin Wayla, who died in Makkah in 102
A.H. after him, in the 6th or even the 7th century A.H. Long-living Sahaba were created, among whom are the following.
1.
Jubair bin Harb. Hafiz ibn Hajar writes that it was well known about him that he took part in Ghazwa-e-Kandak.
Amir Abdul Karim says that I had the privilege together with Imam Nazir to meet him along in 573
A.H. 2. Abu Abdullah Sakli lived in the 5th century A.H. Regarding him, it is said that he had shaken hands with Rasulullah, and for that reason, people would go repeatedly to see him and shake his hands to attain blessings. 3. Kai bin Taym Gilani. There was a mark on his forehead about which it was made famous that he was kicked by Hazrat Ali's mule. At the beginning of the 6th century A.H.
there were ahadith which were attributed to him. 4.
Baba Ratan Hindi. It is said regarding him that he was present at the marriage of Hazrat Fatima, the daughter of the Messenger.
He lived in India and died in 632 A.H.
Through these living Sahabi, all kinds of narratives were invented in their names and spread among the Ummah. Some people, considering these as authentic, incorporated them in their compilations. The mental state of these scholars was such that when scholars of ahadith started refusing to accept these lies, they confronted them with heated arguments. Imam Zabi included in his compilations all that was attributed to Baba Ratan. At this Allama Mujaddad ud Din Kamis became annoyed, and when Hafiz ibn Hajar also declared these as wrong, he was opposed vehemently by Allama Safdi. 2.4 Critique of Ahadith. From this brief summary, one can understand how strong the influence of liars and inventors was, and how much inclination there was among the people to accept such lies. One is astonished that an ummah which has the bright light of a complete book such as the Quran could fall into such a dark cave of lies.
When the compilers of Ahadith had written all this material, they compiled whatever they had received at that time into books, apart from excluding a very few narratives which were obviously false. All these Ahadith were collected with certifications, i.e.,
the names of the narrators through whom these were received were noted.
After this, the process of evaluation commenced as to their being right or wrong. In this evaluation process, the scholars of Ahadith bore two things in mind: firstly, the content of Ahadith, and secondly, their rawat.
Reporting system. To check the content of a topic, they devised the following principles. 1. It is against intellect. 2. It is against nature. 3. It is against the Quran. 4.
It is contrary to history.
5.
It is against some event or common sense.
6. It is narrated against some companions or wider family of the Messenger. 7. It promises great rewards for minor deeds. 8.
Or assigns great punishments to small sins.
9. Such an event that could have been narrated by a lot of people, but was narrated by just one individual. But by following these principles, only a few Ahadith were detected as wrong or fabricated. This was because the people who invented a Hadith made sure they had viewed every aspect of it in order to avoid its being detected and caught.
Moreover,
the door to arguments relating to these narratives was so open that wherever a narration seemed to be against intellect and the Quran, they would immediately modify it to make it seem plausible. Therefore, these principles which were devised to recognize wrong narratives nearly all proved to be futile.
Thereafter these critics turned their attention to the second thing, i.e., rawat, evaluation of the narrators. Obviously these critics were not messengers of Allah who were able through the revelation of Allah to recognize those thousands of compilers and liars who were being born in the last 100 to 150 years. Most of whom were popular and respected in the community. The only means they had available to them to recognize such people was via the narratives themselves, i.e., they verified each narrator's being truthful or a liar based on narratives which had reached the people about these narrators. During the days of the Sahaba and those who immediately followed, there were fewer liars and people of weak character, and as a result not much in the way of narratives has been referred to them. Some references have been made to Imam Shabi, Ibn Sirin and Sa'id bin al-Musayyib. Towards the middle of the second A.H.
Imam Amish and Imam Malik strived to find out weak Ahadith. They were followed by Muammar, Hasham, Wastwai, Auzai, Sufyan Sauri, Ibn al-Majashan, Hamad bin Salma etc. And later Yahya bin Sa'id al-Qattan, who died in 198 A.H. and Ibn Mehdi, who were the acknowledged Imams of Rijal. But up till this point it was oral knowledge, and from 3rd A.H. the writing of books began that contained information about each and every narrator, followed by a discussion about them. Jara and Ta'adil. There are two famous personalities of those days, Imam Yahya bin Mo'in, who died in 233 A.H., and Ahmad bin Hanbal, who died in 241 A.H., after whom this process mushroomed and hundreds of imams became involved in this pastime and thousands of books were written. Since truth and falsehood are internal human characteristics for which it is not possible to get concrete evidence, this is why there are infinite differences in the narrations. There are thousands who, if they are declared truthful, another will declare to be liars.
As far as visible human aspects such as piety and
worship etc. are concerned, the experience of Muhaddisin themselves is very bitter about this. In this respect, Imam Yahya bin Sa'id al-Qattan says that no one can be a bigger liar regarding ahadith than Allah Sallallahu Khair. Those who profess good.
In the preface of Sahih Muslim, Imam Muslim writes that lies come out unwittingly even from those professing good. Ayub Sakhtiani praised the knowledge, piety, cleanliness and ibadat of a neighbor highly. But after this he said that if he testifies in front of me even in the case of a kajor, I will not accept his evidence.
This is why out of necessity the authentication of narrations is based purely on the acceptability and renown of narrators. And the condition of acceptability and renown is such that even those who are accepted as imams, they too are not free from mistrust.
Instead, we listen to opinions of their compatriot imams and even doubt their being imams.
Some of these kind of opinions are reproduced from Muqtazar Jama Bayan al-Ilm, by Hafiz Abdul Bar, page 196.
Imam Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman,
who is the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, on his return to Iraq from his journey to Mecca when the people gathered around him, said, O people of Iraq, thank Allah, I have seen the scholars of Hejaz. By God, your children, in fact even the children of your children are more knowledgeable than them. And who were these scholars of Hejaz? Atta bin Abi Rabah, Tauz, Akrama and Mujahid etc., who are all acknowledged in the entire Muslim world. When the name of this Hamad's teacher Ibrahim Nakai was mentioned to Imam Shabi, he said that he comes to us at night to ask our opinion and in the morning he issues fatwas. When Imam Ibrahim heard this, he said that Shabi was a liar. He is quoting from Masruq though he had heard not a single word from him.
There was mention of Imam Malik in front of Imam Maghazi bin Ishaq.
He said, produce his narratives in front of me.
I am his critic.
Betar. When Imam Malik heard this, he stated that Ibn Ishaq was Dajjal. On one occasion someone inquired from Imam Malik about the scholars of Iraq.
He said, consider them just like Ahl Kitab.
Neither affirm it nor refute it.
Imam Abu Hanifa once went to inquire about the health of Imam Amish. On leaving, he said that had it not been unbearable for you, I would have stayed longer.
Imam Amish said, never mind your coming here, I cannot stand your presence even in your own house.
On departing, Imam Abu Hanifa said that neither Imam Amish's prayers nor his fasting have ever been acceptable.
Regarding such writings, the Muhaddisin state that such mutual rivalry exists between compatriot scholars. Because of this their comments about each other are not fit to be taken seriously and it does not detract from anyone's stature as an imam.
I do not wish to enter into an argument about the validity of this reply.
My purpose is only to point out that if the opinions of these imams could be influenced by their emotive feelings concerning compatriots, why could it not influence other sentiments? We see clearly that acceptance of narrations was not only on the basis of their worth as truth, but was also influenced by the relation of a teacher and pupil and also on the similarities of common beliefs prevailing among them at that time. Where there is a difference of opinion on an issue, there is criticism even against a great established scholar. For example, Haris Hamdani was an acknowledged scholar from whom nothing was ever proven to be a lie. But because he used to express his love for Hazrat Ali, for this he was called a liar by Shabi and with the passage of time was also counted among the fabricators. Many people had their reservations about Imam Abu Hanifa in certain matters.
Ibn Abi Zayd and Abdul Aziz bin Salma etc.
argued about a few particular issues with Imam Malik. Yahya bin Mo'in himself called Imam Shafi an uncertified scholar. Similarly, there are hundreds of imams who were condemned just because of differences of opinion. Lamenting this, a famous poet Abu al-Atahiyya of the period of Harun ar-Rashid has said, Islam wept due to grief caused by its own scholars, and they did not care even when they saw it weeping. Most among them are such that they would declare something wrong which was a truth if it came from their opponents, and declare their own wrong as right. Therefore, from
whom among them can we hope for deen, and in
whose opinion can we place our trust? In fact, the art of jara and tadal is purely guesswork. Qiyas.
And even in this qiyas, besides emotions, leniency has been resorted to.
In Tazkirat al-Mawzu'at, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, Ibn Mehdi, and Ibn Mubarak have all three said that we maintain strictness while checking attributions about halal and haram, but we practice leniency in the case of fazail.
Right from the outset there had been two distinct types of scholars, lenient and harsh.
The first group had Imam Shabi of the harsh type and Sufyan Sari of the lenient. In the second group, Ibn Mehdi was lenient and Yahya bin Sa'id al-Qattan harsh. In the third group, Ahmad bin Hanbal is lenient compared to Ibn Mo'in, and in the fourth group Abu Hatim was harsh compared to Imam Bukhari. This is why the strength or weakness of a particular narrative is wholly dependent on those who interpret it.
And not only are ahadith presumptive, but the criteria to judge them are also presumptive.
And this has been acknowledged by Muhaddisin themselves. Mullah Ali Qadri writes in Mawzu'at-e-Kabi, page 16. The strength or weakness of ahadith is wholly based on what the Muhaddisin understand on examining their certifications. Otherwise there is no way to be certain. Because intellect demands that what they call correct is authentic and what they call authentic is correct. Therefore nothing can be said with certainty about a hadith that it was said by Rasulullah. Only this much can be said, that it is a saying which is attributed to the messenger, regardless of whether this attribution is true or false.
Imam Malik used to read this verse from the Quran.
We just speculate. We are not sure.
45.
32. Then the big question is this: by establishing the
authenticity of narrators as reliable, how does it become compulsory that the content of ahadith is also correct?
Since the inventors of ahadith used to affix certifications of authenticity to their own invented narratives so that no one could declare them as false.
As already noted, they had 17 Yahya bin Mo'ins and 17 Ahmed bin Hanbals. Therefore the first principle should have been that proof of the authenticity of a narrative should provide proof of the authenticity of the authority with which the narrative is quoted.
The second principle should have been that once it is known about someone that he is quoting a narration from someone attributable to someone else, none of his narrations should be acceptable.
But what we see is that contrary to this, big imams are involved in errors of judgments in this reporting e.g. Imam Hassan Basri, Makul Shami, Sufyan Sari, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ibrahim Nakhai, Malik, Uns, Darqutni, etc. Therefore this process of critically appraising narrations was also proven to be a failure. Moreover, this is also against taqwa and intellect, because for the Ummah which has the Quran in its hand in which it is stated, "This day we have completed your deen." 5. 3. When did it become legitimate for it to search for deen by digging up and uprooting the dead bodies of dead imams and buried narrations? To resuscitate them with a view to evaluate and authenticate them, and to determine their truth or falsehood by merely basing it on statements of people. Imam Yahya bin Mo'in was the first one to write the history of verification of narrators titled Tariq your Rijal, where he propounded hundreds of narrators of ahadith as true and certified, but also declared thousands more as liars and dajjals. At that time the scholars of the Ummah were so perturbed by this that they expressed great indignation. About this the poet Bakar bin Hamad commented, Ibn Mo'in has said things about people about which Allah will question him. If these are true, then this comes under backbiting, and if false, then there will be a strict punishment for him.
Muhaddithin needed a criterion to judge ahadith as correct or wrong, but they were careless about this and in fact furthered this process and made it a permanent profession.
And today with a lot of pride they quote
Dr. Springer, who said that Muslims are famed for this distinction, that they have been able to preserve the pasts of its 500,000 scholars. But the reality is that out of these 500,000, apart from a few who worked for the welfare of Muslims or who stood up for the truth, the rest were doing nothing but were immersed in attributions and narrations. Finding out what the names and aliases were, who the teachers and pupils were, how many of their narrations are correct and how many are wrong, etc., is neither useful nor anything to take pride in as far as historical knowledge is concerned. Instead, a result of these narrations and attributions is that it has impacted on the intellectual decline of the Ummah. 2.5 Principles of Ahadith. By principles of ahadith, I do not mean its terminology, instead I refer to those procedures which Muhaddithin followed in their narrations. Almost all of these principles are erroneous and weak from the ideological perspective.
At this time I am only looking at those principles which shed light on the status of ahadith.
The first principle is narration with a meaning, i.e. those narrations which are taken from Rasulullah not word for word, but instead are taken by meaning. And in any case, how could those be word for word?
Because the Sahaba who used to be present in his company neither used to write down any of his conversations nor used to memorize them nor narrate them.
And they only got an opportunity to narrate them after a period of a long time. As it was impossible for them to narrate anything word for word as uttered by Rasulullah, therefore they began to state these sayings in their own words. And the Muhaddithin declared this as principally legitimate, and the term narration through meaning took birth. Even though some companions like Hazrat Ibn Umar used to consider these as not legitimate, and either they used to keep quiet or only used to narrate those narrations whose words they remembered. Because with a change of words something of the meaning does alter, which is against taqwa in the narration of ahadith. Hazrat Imran bin Hassin said that if, like others, I also wish to start quoting narrations, then I can talk for 2 nights and 2 days continuously, because the way other people have heard Rasulullah.
I too have heard him, but I fear that I will fall into the same errors that I see others falling into. From this we can see that from the beginning meanings had started to change with a change in words, and differences began to emerge, and those who had vision and were righteous learnt a lesson.
With the exception of Imams Ibn Sirin, Malik, Qatada and Abu Bakr Zari, some among the followers, usually Muhaddithin, used to say narrations through meanings only. Imam Sufyan Sauri said, "If I say to you that the words of my narration are exactly the same that Rasulullah said, then do not consider me truthful. I narrate through meanings." This is what other Muhaddithin used to say as well. Qazi Badruddin said to his teacher, Ibn Malik, that ahadith bil mana, narrations through meanings, are quoted, and the narrators are mostly Arami, non-Arabs, who explain them in their own words. So how can we ascertain as to the real meaning of a saying of Rasulullah?
Ibn Malik remained silent and did not reply.
Abu Hayyan has written that this was the reason that whatever evidence has been provided by imams of linguistics was based on ayat,
verses of the Quran,
and not via narrations, because they did not trust that the words of ahadith are those of Rasulullah. If in a narration words are proven to be exactly what was said, it will be a coincidence. Due to Ravayat bil mana, narrations through meanings, there has been a great change in the status of ahadith because their attribution to Rasulullah has been restricted to meanings only. And it cannot be definitely said to what extent the words of a narrator are in line with what was intended by Rasulullah. Because sometimes with the alteration of a single word, the meaning of an entire passage changes. And in such a situation this point is very clear. That argument on a specific subject from the words of a hadith is totally baseless, because we do not know what the actual words uttered by Rasulullah were.
The second principle is the acceptability of a news item i.e.
Muhaddithin considered acceptable a narration whose narrator was one but who according to their standard was trustworthy and considered acceptable by them. The scholars who were researchers opposed it there and then.
Ibrahim bin Ishmael said that a narration is equivalent to presenting evidence, therefore in every category, until there are at least two narrators, it cannot be accepted.
Mu'tazila and particularly Abu Ali Jabai also criticized it severely.
But Muhaddithin took no notice, as due to this they would have had to give up a large chunk of ahadith.
And this was probably the reason why Imam Ghazali and Imam Razi colluded with them, despite being philosophers and intellectuals.
Even though in the case of even minor business exchanges,
which are worldly matters, when there is an order given in the Quran to have two Muslims as witnesses, then how could there not be a need for two witnesses in matters of deen? From the narratives themselves, it appears that the Khulafai Rashidin, first four caliphs, used to ask for witnesses. Qabeza says that a woman once came to Hazrat Abu Bakr demanding a share in the inheritance left by her grandson. He said that according to the Book of Allah, I do not find a share for you, and then said, do you have any witness for what you say? Muhammad bin Muslima said that I am a witness. Then he gave her a tenth of it. Similarly, Abu Musa called out at the door of Hazrat Umar. When he received no response, he turned back. Meanwhile, Hazrat Umar came out from inside and asked, why are you turning back after calling out to me? He replied that Rasulullah has said that when you get no response after calling out 3 times, then go back. Hazrat Umar said, bring a witness, otherwise I will deal with you suitably. Abu Musa became pale with fear and went running towards the mosque to the companions. He narrated the incident and said that if anyone has heard this narration from the messenger, he should come with me. So one companion went and testified, and only then did Hazrat Umar leave him alone. But during the times of the companions it was possible to find eye-witnesses, so at that time this method was fully justified. But in later times the position of a narrator was no longer that of an eye-witness but became that of a claimant who wanted to impose a belief or act said to be from Rasulullah, on the whole ummah whose population could be billions of people. And his narration is also based on reporting something from one person to another and then another. Therefore it is incumbent upon him to produce 2 just witnesses who should testify that he has heard it from such and such a person in their own presence. And then in the same way till the end of the process there must be 2 witnesses present listening to every narrator from the first to the last narrator. Without this, according to the principle of justice and the law of Sharia, his narration is not capable of being acceptable. Now it is necessary to contemplate that whatever collection of narrations we have, there is not a single such narration in it which has been corroborated in this way or which could be done so. This is why all the narrations are unauthentic. There is only one kind of narration which could be authentic, i.e. mutawatir, continuously reported, which has been defined by Hafiz ibn Hajar in Nakbat al-Fikr as follows. A large number of people who cannot habitually conform to a lie, who narrate it, and from the beginning till the end their numbers remain the same, and on this basis assurance is felt and the listener achieves certainty. In other words, there are 4 conditions for a piece of news to be mutawatir, continuous. 1. The number of its narrators is so large it is impossible for them all to join together to mutually agree on a lie. 2. From the beginning till the end, at every stage the number of narrators remains as great. If at any stage there is a reduction in this number, then it will not be considered mutawatir. 3. It is not just that a piece of news is mutawatir, it should also be based on something tangible. For example, Makkah is a city. Even if its narrators are in thousands, this news would be mutawatir, continuous and certain. Contrary to this, even if millions of people say that Jesus is the Son of God, this news will not be mutawatir, i.e., continuous, because its dependence is on something which is not tangible and merely a belief.
4.
Just by hearing this news, the listener should be certain of it, and should not be in need of any further evidence. Such a hadith that meets all of the above 4 conditions will be considered mutawatir and worthy of certainty, and is counted in the authentic category by intellectual scholars. But this kind of mutawatir hadith does not exist. This is why, despite being favorably disposed towards ahadith, Allama ibn Ayla has written that according to this definition, finding a mutawatir hadith is difficult.
While referring to this statement,
Hafiz ibn Hajar opines that such ahadith can be found, but the reality is that the 4 conditions which determine a hadith as being mutawatir are not related to literal words but to meanings. Moreover, he changed the meaning of mutawatir, and tried to declare famous ahadith as being mutawatir despite the fact that there could never be any question of their being so. If some sahabi or imam narrates a saying, after which the numbers of narrators of this saying increase, it will not be mutawatir because the number of narrators is not the same from the beginning till the end.
Those who out of devotion declare the narrations of the Sahihain,
the compilators of ahadith considered to be authentic, as mutawatir, for example of Imam Taymiyyah and Ibn Salah, these can be considered mutawatir up to the time of these writers. But in the period of 250 years that spans between him and Rasulullah, these narrations were related to one narrator. To explain it more clearly, mutawatir is that news which has the inherent potential to be certain and does not need any claim, argument or certification for its authenticity. And there is no such hadith, rather all the ahadith are single news, and the imams who devised these conditions have clarified that single news, originally narrated by one person, is not authentic enough to be believed. 2.6 Arguments for ahadith. Muhaddithin have tried to argue for the status of ahadith in deen through the use of the Quranic verses.
Therefore, it is necessary to document their responses so that the truth becomes very clear.
In the 7th volume of his book, Kitab Imam Shafi,
who died in 204 A.H.,
has mentioned a group of people who did not accept the place of ahadith in deen. And he has mentioned his arguments with one of them. This man questioned the Imam, saying that
the commands that the Quran has imposed on the Ummah, some among them you call common, some special, some mandatory and some optional. And you do all this based on such narrations which are attributed to those narrators, the majority of whom you have neither heard in person, nor met.
And despite your being convinced of their being just and authentic, yet you do not hold this belief regarding any one of them that they are free of mistakes, misunderstanding, error and forgetfulness. And despite this you also consider their narrations as being so reliable that on the basis of these you differentiate in the commands of Allah. The gist of the reply that Imam Shafi gave is that through these narrations the news of Sunnah reaches us. And the Sunnah is that which has been described in the following verse of the Quran as hikmat. Wisdom. 3:164. Moreover, there is another verse that says, O people, whatever the messenger gives you, accept it, and from whatever he stops you, avoid it. 59:7. From this the place of Sunnah in deen is established.
After this the Imam writes that the man retracted his statement.
The reality is that we consider the quietening of an unconvinced questioner through such arguments to be purely a trick of Imam Shafi's. Because the fact is that the Imam did not answer any part of his question. His objection was regarding the nature and process of narrations, that these are doubtful and are therefore not capable of being used to make decisions on the undisputed verses of the Quran. Besides, the use of the meaning of hikmat which he related to Hadeeth in support of it is in no way right. Hikmat is a common word which means wise discussions. One attribute of the Quran is hakim, i.e.,
there are frequent discussions of hikmat noted in many verses of the Quran. And Allah descended onto you the book,
the Quran, and wisdom. 4.
113.
In comparison to the 10 commandments of the Torah, Allah sent 13 commandments in Surah Bani Israel, and Allah stated, "This wisdom, hikmah, is in what has been revealed to you by your sustainer."
17.
39. This unconvinced questioner had objected that the spouses of Rasulullah were commanded in the Quran. And remember all the ayat and wisdom that are recited in your homes. 33. 34. This makes it clear that hikmat, wisdom,
is part of the Quran, otherwise who is going to recite Ahadith? Even though it is Imam Shafi's own saying that Ahadith are not revealed by Allah but are the interpretations of whatever the Messenger understood from the Quran, and said,
so that hikmat which is proved to be revelation from Allah, how can it be declared as Hadeeth? The Quran has stated, "We bestowed wisdom on Luqman." 31.
12.
Was Luqman given the Ahadith of the final messenger, Rasulullah? The other verse, 59. 7, quoted by Imam Shafi, which he presented in defense of his claim, and which is quoted even today by religious scholars in his footsteps, is concerning the distribution of booty remaining after battle and without actual battle, and has nothing remotely to do with Ahadith. Here the meaning of the word ata, which is used as the opposite of nahi, has been erroneously taken as meaning amara or kala. Even though this word ata has appeared in the Quran hundreds of times, it has never been used to convey such meanings. Its meanings everywhere are to give.
Therefore this argument too is not valid.
A third argument presented by some people is that given in Surah An-Najm, he,
the Messenger, does not speak from himself. It is the revelation sent down to him.
53. 3-4. Therefore whatever was uttered by Rasulullah was all revelation. This argument is however far from the truth, because here reference is to the revelation from Allah, which is the Quran alone, and which was being denied by the kuffar,
non-believers,
both in his family life dealing with his spouses, as well as in matters relating to daily living. Rasulullah used to be busy day and night in conversations with other people.
There was never any question as to these being revelation, nor was there any dispute about this.
Opposition was only to the Quran, and it is this alone which was revealed through wahi as stated in the Quran.
And the Quran has been revealed to me so that
I warn you and all whom it reaches. 6:19. In another verse,
say that I do but warn you according to the revelation.
21:45. The fact is that warning is only in the Quran, and this has been revealed to inform people. Rasulullah had this written down and made people memorize it.
Some people have classified revelation into two types.
Matlu,
which is recited,
and Gair Matlu, not recited, or Jali, visible or known,
or Kafi,
secret or hidden. They call one the Quran and the other Ahadith. But this is only their own invented idea which the Quran has nothing to do with. If Ahadith had also been a revelation, then why did Rasulullah not have these put down in writing like the Quran? The fourth argument, which is stressed with great vehemence, is that in many verses Allah has commanded to obey the Messenger. If Ahadith have no role in deen, then how will this be carried out? In fact, this is a gross misunderstanding which leads to making Ahadith part of deen. Here I feel that it is necessary for me to briefly note this much, that the Messenger of Allah had two positions. 1. Messengerhood, i.e., to convey Allah's messages to mankind without any alteration.
To recognize and accept this position and to have Iman in him is made compulsory.
This messengerhood ended with Rasul's demise. 2. Imamate,
Leadership, i.e.,
to manage the Ummah according to the Quran. Its integration, decisions through mutual consultations, strategies for battles and wars and agreements, providing leadership on such collective matters, deputations etc. In this position acceptance and willing obedience to him was made essential.
This great imamate which was established through his person for the good and welfare of mankind is defined till the day of resurrection and is that which should endure through those who follow him as living successors of this.
The commands in the Quran relating to obedience to the Messenger are not confined to the life and person of the Messenger but are for the role of imamate in which all the caliphs to come are included. Their obedience is the obedience of the Messenger, and the obedience of the Messenger is the obedience of Allah.
Wherever in the Quran there is a command to obey Allah and the Messenger, this means obedience of the Imam of the time, i.e., central authority of the Ummah. While Rasulullah was alive among the Ummah, obedience to him was obedience of Allah and Rasul. And after him, obedience to the living successors will be construed as obedience of Allah and Rasul. Obedience to Rasulullah never means that we should start following anyone who says anything in his name.
This type of mentality developed in the Ummah at that time when no righteous caliph remained. And tyrants captured the center stage and enslaved the Ummah and gave up leadership of Deen, which was taken over by scholars and narrators of Hadeeth. From that very day the Ummah started suffering from religious individualism and mutual strife. Otherwise all the requirements of Deen can be easily fulfilled through obedience of the Quran and by following the imamate. Leadership of the time. With the Imam there will be selected individuals of the Ummah through whose mutual consultations he will manage the affairs and the needs of the time in accordance with the Quran.
And in this way he will maintain the central authority through unity of command and will not let it suffer division.
It is important to make it clear here that the one whom Allah has addressed in the Quran is the human intellect in which he has bestowed the ability of reasoning and vision. Whatever light is required for his guidance has been given in the Quran and is sufficient for all times and places and is not associated with any particular environment. Which is contrary to the narratives which consign people to the distant past. The Quran is a detailed book radiating light and making things clear, which was understood effortlessly by its first addressees, i.e.,
the companions of the Messenger.
Rasulullah had little need to explain its words and meanings. During the whole period of messengerhood,
the number of queries raised by the companions in relation to the teachings of the Quran are 14 according to a narration by Imam Razi and 12 according to a narration by Hazrat Abdullah bin Abbas.
All their replies were revealed in the Quran itself, and each one of these is noted in Allama Suyuti's Atqan and in the last page of Jama Bayan al-Ilm. In other words, this can be verified by anyone by looking for the terms Yaz alunaka and Yastaftatanaka in the Quran.
2.7 Quran and Ahadith.
Allah has given the Quran alone the status of the Book of Iman.
The Messenger has Iman in what has been revealed to him from his sustainer, and so do Mu'minin.
285. And Rasulullah and his Ummah have been directed to have Iman in this book alone. Say ye,
we believe in Allah and the revelation given to us.
136. But say, I believe in the book which Allah has sent down. 42:15.
There are so many such verses that it is difficult to include them.
And in the whole of the Quran, apart from having Iman in the Book of Allah, there is no command to have Iman in any
Hadeeth. In fact, it is forbidden.
But there are, among men, those who purchase idle tales. Ahadith.
Without knowledge, to mislead
Men from the path of Allah and throw ridicule. For such there will be a humiliating penalty. 31. 6. In this verse, 3 attributes of Hadeeth have been noted.
1.
It is used to misguide the people.
2. It is not based on knowledge
i.e. evidence. 3. By this people ridicule the guidance of Allah i.e. deen. In the same way that the Quran is the book of Iman, it is the code of conduct also, and this is the very thing that has been commanded to be followed. Follow that which has been revealed to you by your sustainer. 6.
106.
And Rasulullah has been directed to proclaim it. Say that I just follow what has been revealed to me by my sustainer. 7.
203.
And the decision was made for the Ummah that follow it that has been sent to you by your sustainer, and do not follow others beside him. 7.
3. The central authority i.e.
Imam has been commanded to govern the people according to this Quran. So judge between them what Allah has revealed. 5.
48. And whoever does not make decisions according to the Quran is fasik.
And those who do not decide according to the book, the Quran, are fasikin. 5. 47. It is declared to be the duty of the messenger to convey the message of the Quran to others. O messenger, proclaim the message which has been sent to you from your sustainer. If you did not, then you would not have fulfilled and proclaimed his mission.
5. 67. This Quran contains the warnings for others. And this Quran has been revealed to me by inspiration so that I may warn you and all whom it reaches.
6.
19.
And say that I just warn you through the revelation. 21. 45.
As such, this is the same clear light
i.e. the Quran, in the light of which the messenger himself walked and led others. Its truth, like the sun rising on the horizon of his heart, was like a burning lamp emitting light all around.
This was his resource of education and proclamation, which served as glad tidings and a warning for others, and by this he helped people to purify and develop themselves, taking them out of the
darkness of ignorance into the light of Islam. We have sent unto you the book so as to bring the people out of darknesses and into the light.
14. 1.
And through this he made decisions on all matters of life. We have sent down to you the book in truth, so that you judge between people as guided by Allah. 4. 105.
And this is the book which is the absolute truth from the beginning to the end. This is the book in which there is no doubt.
2. 2.
In deen to follow uncertain things is prohibited.
Pursue not that of which you have no knowledge, for every act of hearing, or of seeing, or of heart, emotions and thoughts, will be inquired into. 17.
36.
And the Quran has said about conjectural matters,
conjecture avails nothing against truth.
53.
28.
If you obey most people on earth, they will lead you away from the path of Allah. They follow nothing but conjecture. 6. 116. The Jews collected ahadith of their ancestors, on the basis of which they say that hell cannot burn us for more than a few days. The Quran declared, they say never will the fire touch us but for a few numbered days, for their forgeries deceive them as to their own deen. 3. 24. 2.8 Intellect and Hadeeth. If one looks at ahadith using intellect, then their status in deen cannot be proven, because they are reported as a series of narrations passed from one to another. For example,
I heard from Zaid who heard from Umar. He heard from Bakar.
He from Khalid.
And he from Asgar and he from Akbar. Such reporting which passes through so many mediums is neither evidence nor knowledge, and aside from being conjecture can never reach the status of certainty. Because if a person with whom I am acquainted narrates something to me, then I can decide about the truth or falsehood of his statement according to the opinion which I hold about him in my heart.
But when he says that he has heard it from Zayd, then since I do not know Zayd, I have no criteria to make an assessment. Now, according to the belief that he holds about Zayd himself, he can make a judgment about whether Zayd's statement is true or false. And when he says that Zayd has heard this narration from Umar, then even he does not have any criteria left with which to judge the truth of the statement. Therefore those sayings that reach us through a series of narrators cannot be deemed an authority for any narrator or listener. At the most one can only say regarding them that the medium of people through whom these were narrated were trustworthy people. But even this trust is neither mine nor of the one who is quoting it, rather it is based on those statements that are of the compatriots of these narrators.
Therefore this trust is a historical entity, and aside from history, deen cannot be based on this, because history is based on conjecture, whereas deen requires certainty.
And this is not available in narrations except if they are mutawatir, and regarding being mutawatir, it has already been said that there is no hadith based on this. Rather the collection of all ahadith are one news, and the Allama have developed a consensus about them that in the matter of being correct, they have not attained the status of absolute truth. In his best book Imam Ghazali writes, "A single news does not give the benefit of truth. What is meant by single news? On the same page it is written. At this juncture what we mean by single news is that hadith which does not reach the point of tawatir. Continuous series. For example, a hadith reported by a group to have been quoted through 5 or 6 narrators is single news. 5 or 6 has been used as an example, otherwise unless a narration fulfills all the 4 preconditions of tawatir as stated earlier, it will remain non-mutawatir. Discontinuous and single news, even if it has been reported by hundreds of narrators. We have already stated that the start of the writing down of ahadith commenced in the 2nd century A. H.
when the Umayyad dynasty had enslaved Muslims.
Out of all of these collections which are in the hands of the Ummah today, none belong to the period before this.
In fact, the 6 books,
Sahih Sitta,
which are popular among Ahl-Sunnat, were compiled in the 3rd century A.
H. This happened during the reign of the Umayyad dynasty because their caliphs had given up on leadership of deen and left it in the hands of muhaddisin and narrators of ahadith. Due to this their piety and greatness was established among the Ummah. And upon seeing this thousands of people adopted narration of ahadith as their profession, and became popular and respectable among the general masses.
Later on, those imams of ahadith who stood up to evaluate these, had no criteria through which to separate correct and false ahadith except the statements of people and their own guesswork. Because of this even those ahadith that were declared correct by them remained doubtful.
Therefore whatever criticism non-Muslim critics direct towards Islam, is mostly based on these ahadith which have been accepted by Muslims as correct, but are really not correct. That is why the Imams of ahadith have clarified that optimism in respect of ahadith is not right.
Rather it is essential to judge and evaluate them, because hadith is news in which there is the possibility of it being true or false. Therefore they themselves also made efforts to review them. From this it is clear that ahadith come under the remit of intellectual scrutiny, and that their status is not of deen, because matters of deen are certain and above criticism. This is the reason Allah has commanded to have iman on the messengers so that later on there could be no doubt about their messages. Contrary to this, there is no command to have iman on the narrators of ahadith whereby the truth of their narrations could be established. Leaving aside narratives, there are thousands of such narrators who if one calls them truthful, another will call them liars, and we cannot question or hold any one of them accountable. This is because with regards to criticism every man is free to express his views according to his conscience. That is why evaluation of narratives is academic and their status is historical and therefore cannot be viewed as part of deen.
2.9 Standing of Ahadith.
Bearing in mind the previous chapters, the following issues become evident. 1. Ahadith became prevalent against the will of Rasulullah himself as well as the first four caliphs. This is because Rasulullah had emphasized to desist from attributing any narrations to him, and the first four caliphs also made continuous efforts to end this completely.
2. The same is the case with the writing down of Ahadith. The Messenger had unequivocally forbidden this, and the caliphs and the Sahaba continuously destroyed and burnt these narrations and stopped the Ummah from the potential chaos of writing these.
3.
The correctness or weakness of Ahadith is dependent on speculation and guesswork. Because Imams of Jara and Ta'dil had no other criteria except statements and qiyas which could be used to differentiate with surety between correct and weak narratives. Therefore Ahadith which are declared authentic by them are also conjectural.
According to their principle, calling a narrative correct means, it is probable that Rasulullah may have said it like this, instead of stating with absolute certainty.
Mullah Ali Qadri in his book Al-Mawzu'at has clarified.
The strength of these ahadith depends on what the Muhaddisin understood by seeing their certifications.
Otherwise there was no way to ascertain their accuracy, because intellect demands that what they declared as correct is in fact correct. Then those ahadith which have been declared as correct are narrated as a meaning only because of which there are a lot of contradictions among them. Accepting these as deen resulted in the formation of hundreds of sects within the Ummah, and this led to divisions. Sunnis and Shias have their own collections of ahadith. Every sect has raised the edifice of its religion based on ahadith which are in accordance to their own desires. And each considers only their own collection of ahadith as correct and rejects the ahadith of other sects. And the creation of sects is shirk according to the Quran. And do not become like mushrikin, i.e., like those who have created rifts in deen.
31-32.
No doubt there can be differences in understanding the meanings of the Quran, but since these differences will not be related to the words or sentences, but will be in the understanding of a particular context, these will therefore be eradicated through greater reflection and reasoning, and the forming of sects will not be possible from this. In reality, the correct place of ahadith is that of the history of deen. They can be used to obtain some advantages in historical reporting but cannot be presented as a basis for deen. The biggest loss in making it deen is that the Quran, which is complete life, has been relegated to the background.
The favorite and important topics which have come under intense discussions among the Muhaddisin are commonly those which have no relevance in practical life or for the progress of the Ummah.
For example, who is more respectable? Is Hazrat Abu Bakr superior or Hazrat Ali? Is the Quran a living or a non-living entity? How does Allah descend on the earth during the latter part of the night? Should we clasp our hands or leave them at our sides while offering prayers or not? Is it mandatory to read Surah Fatiha while standing behind the Imam? Should Ameen be said loudly or quietly? Etc. Contrary to this, had dependence remained solely on the Quran, then such matters would have remained in sight as to how to strengthen the central authority and make it effective in carrying out righteous deeds. What resources are available to make Quranic guidance widely known and to keep the whole of mankind free and prosperous? How can the hidden potentials of the forces of nature which the Quran has declared have been made subservient to man, be harnessed with a view to using them for the good of mankind? Through what means to promote Iman and righteous deeds in the world, so that every individual of the Ummah becomes a caliph on earth in his own right for which he has been created, etc., etc.